Oh my God, this is so real.
Yeah, my one time sitting in front of this camera did not prepare me for this.
No, I wouldn't think so. Same. This is much different than just talking in class, I gotta be honest.
Yeah, I'm really nervous that once I'm off this.
Are they gonna say like action? Oh my God, it's gonna be awesome.
It's just us.
I mean,
Hello, and welcome to the Hood College Broadcasting YouTube channel. I'm Amrit Brown.
and I'm Casey Rowine.
Tonight, from the studio in Rosenstock, we are bringing you Hood College's first ever live election night coverage.
Stay tuned as we, along with our classmates from our elections and campaign class, give you live updates on the state of the presidential race, key congressional elections across the country, and local Maryland races.
You can also expect a deep dive into the campaign strategy of each candidate, a look into how former President Trump's 2024 campaign is different than in 2016 and 2020, and a special segment on campaign scandals from both candidates.
Let's dive right into it. Amrit, if we were to call the election tonight, what would need to happen?
Sure. So as a reminder, in the U.S. election system, a candidate must win 270 electoral college votes to win the election. Each state gets the same amount of electoral votes as members they have in Congress. Since many states can be called before the election through polls, this typically leads political analysts to create paths to victory for each candidate before election night. These paths center around swing states, which are the states where polls have a difficult time determining a clear winner. If we were to call the election tonight, one candidate would need to have an insurmountable electoral college lead, something that is unlikely to happen.
Can you tell me about the swing states?
This year, according to 270 to Win, we have 7 swing states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. These states have a total of 93 electoral votes and thus will be most important in swinging this election left or right. It is important to note that according to 270 to Win, Kamala Harris has 191 safe electoral college votes and Donald Trump has 122. Harris, however, has 35 votes she is likely to win, while Trump has 97.
Can you tell me more about what specific issues might decide these swing states?
Yes, many of these states will be decided by the same issues that are constantly discussed on a global stage. The economy, abortion, and immigration are just some. Some states, however, have specific contexts that could decide their elections. For example, Nevada's automatic voter registration law, enacted in 2022, made nonpartisan voters the largest bloc in the state that year. In the first presidential election since that change, their decisions could drastically change the election in Nevada.
That's a phenomenon I have noticed also. I have another state-specific example that I can share. In Georgia, Atlanta's suburbs have been a key driver in political shifts. In recent years, growing diversity has caused the suburbs to move from red to purple. Additionally, in Georgia, black men make up a larger percentage of the electorate than in any other swing state. Their decisions will be significant.
That's fascinating. I now want to switch gears and talk about candidates' paths to victory. Barring a situation in which either candidate loses a state in which they are likely to win, Kamala Harris can safely say she has 226 votes and Donald Trump can say he has 219. Thus, Harris would need to win at least 44 of the 93 remaining electoral votes, and Trump would need to win 51. The easiest path for both candidates would be to secure the 3 largest battleground states: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Currently, Trump leads in North Carolina and Georgia, while 270 to Win has Pennsylvania in a dead tie. Winning these 3 states would be the only way Trump could secure a victory with wins in only 3 battleground states. Harris, however, has 10 other possible combinations of 3 swing states she could win and secure the election.
How interesting. So does this mean that we can say the election will definitely come down to these 7 states?
Each of the 7 battleground states is currently within the margin of error, meaning polls cannot predict accurately who will win. This doesn't mean that only these 7 states can decide the election. The gap between swing states and the next closest in play is, however, pretty wide. All swing states poll within a 2% margin of error, according to 270 to Win. The next closest polls have a margin of 5%. These states are Iowa, Kansas, and New Hampshire, which hold 6, 6, and 4 electoral votes respectively.
How accurate are these polls?
Polls are not a perfect representation of the electorate. In 2020, for example, battleground states did not always follow the polls, with the difference being incredibly significant.
I'm curious to see how accurate the polls are this year.
I think it's also important to point out that in many swing states, large blocks of voters voted via mail or voted early. In Nevada, for example, all ballots postmarked by Election Day are counted. In Pennsylvania, officials cannot open ballots until the morning of the election. Thus, the election could be up in the air for a couple of days.
After a quick break, we're going to move to talking about the recent results.
Casey, can you tell me a little bit about the results that we already have in?
Okay, so we have some predictions out. We don't have anyone called already, but so far we can see that Trump is predicted to win many southern states like Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, and South Carolina, whilst Kamala is predicted to win more northeast states like Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maryland. Are you surprised by any of these predictions?
No, I expect that many of the more surprising results will come on later in the night, especially in many of the swing states that we've discussed. However, it is interesting that we're getting results from Georgia already, which is going to be a key swing state. So it'll be interesting to see how those results that are already coming in impact our beliefs about the swing states this year.
Yeah, I'll be mainly interested to see how Pennsylvania is going to go. I think that's the closest, and as you said earlier, it's pretty much a 50-50 split, and there are a lot of rural parts of Pennsylvania which you could assume go more Republican, but a lot of cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia which could end up giving them the Democratic swing that they need for Kamala Harris to get that state.
Definitely. I also was interested to pay attention to some of the states that have already been called. I was watching the polls earlier in the day in Florida, and while Trump had a maybe 6% lead, not all of the bigger cities in the state have been called. Do you think we're going to see any surprises with Midwestern or Western states as we move on throughout the day?
I think that would be the more interesting one. I mean, I could see some surprises coming up. Maybe they'll turn more blue than we think. Hopefully Tim Walz's appeal in those states will actually have an effect and see if they can get more of that Midwest Rust Belt voters to participate.
Definitely.
All right, so let's go to a map to see the results that we were just talking about. Oh, okay, sorry.
So on this map, we can see when polls are going to be closing. Obviously, Western and Midwestern states are going to be closing later, which are in red, while polls are already closed in some of the more eastern states. You can see Florida on there is already closed.
I think it'll be interesting to see how when the polls close actually affect the amount of people that could go and vote. You could assume maybe the states that have polls closing later could potentially have more higher voter turnout, things like that, which often a higher voter turnout might lead to a Democratic winner in those states.
Yeah, I was definitely interested to see videos already this morning of incredibly long poll lines. I saw a video, I think it was on CNN, where a voter who had been voting for 30 years said that these were the longest lines that he's ever had in his life. So it'll be definitely interesting to pay attention to how the poll closing time and how long these lines are. Voters can stay in line after the polls have closed, so it'll be interesting to see how those different close times affect the election.
It really will. How did you vote this year? Did you have to wait in a long line?
I did not. I did have to track down postage, make a copy of my ID to send in a mail-in ballot. What about you?
I did a mail-in ballot too, actually, which was, well, I got a mail-in ballot, but I ended up dropping it off at a ballot box because I didn't have any stamps. But still, I think it really does highlight the importance of having these different options for voters to increase the voter turnout this year.
Definitely, and I heard a lot about the huge number of early voters and voting by mail this year. Those numbers were definitely drastic.
Do you think that we're going to see a higher maybe Democratic voter turnout because, you know, a lot of Republicans don't exactly trust these alternate methods? Like in the past, we've had like Republican speakers saying that you shouldn't trust them, they shouldn't use them. Or do you think maybe Republicans this year are going to try to use them to their advantage?
Well, I think we'll see typically that more Republicans will vote in person, but Donald Trump made a big push on mail-in ballots while also claiming that they weren't always used properly. But I think we will see a lot of Republicans use mail-in ballots this year, maybe more than we typically would expect.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree. I think in seeing that, maybe that could give them the swing they needed. Like maybe in the past, these Republican voters who haven't been turning out, that'll be changed by this. If you're someone who can't get to the voting booths, if you're stuck at work, if you're a farmer maybe and you have alternate responsibilities that you're focused on. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it does affect it.
Definitely. It'll also be interesting to see how specific issues affect these swing states. I wanted to talk about Arizona and Nevada, which are both swing states and both heavily impacted by both candidates' jargon on immigration. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that issue will impact these states?
I think we can maybe predict these states will end up being a little bit more red. And of course, like you said, they're going to be voting based on their relationship to the border. And I think a lot of people, Democratic or Republican, can agree Kamala Harris didn't do the best job helping the border situation and actually making a difference to it. But, I'm sure there's other people in those states. Maybe a lot of people have a relationship with immigrants, so they actually feel differently about the border and things like that. So we'll just have to see how they turn out. But some other, things that are going to determine voters, like how do you think abortion might affect this election? It's really been in the news a lot, like Roe v. Wade got overturned. I know it's on the ballot for Maryland, but just thinking the national election, I know it's going to be on a lot of women voters' minds when they go to the polls.
Yeah, I think it could be. It's one of those issues where it could swing the electorate in big ways. I feel like sometimes people have issues close to their heart that they go and vote for, so that'll be abortion will definitely be one of those, and different people's stances are definitely very polarized from each other on the issue, so I think that could be a big part of this election, for sure.
I think so, and I think yes. And now maybe we can take a look at our map from 270.
Yeah, so the map will...
So this map is showing us states that have already been called. I'm thinking...
So on this state, this one, it shows in dark red the states that are safe for Trump, dark blue the states that are safe for Harris, and then you can see that the swing states are in that beige color. Arizona is in a very light red, which they've changed, but that means that it's leaning towards Trump.
Oh my God.
Also, okay, yeah, the 7 in beige are 7 swing states, and will be the keys to this election right here. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to look at the West Coast and see how that looks predominantly blue at the moment, and then when you go over, it's looking more red. A lot of it, I would say, is what I would personally predict, at least. Like we have Texas looking like it's going to be predicted to go to Trump, as well as Florida, a lot of other southern states. So far it seems what we would expect. Like we talked about earlier, I'm really interested to see how the swing states play out, and hopefully we get those results in shortly.
Yeah, and I heard a lot about the blue wall, which would be the 3 northern states that are pictured up there, which are Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, as being a big path to victory for Harris this year. So if she ended her campaign in the north, so that's definitely an appeal for the Democratic Party right now.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be interesting to see as well how the ads, I know specifically in Pennsylvania, there's been a ton of negative ads being played in places like Philly, Pittsburgh, and to see if those actually are going to make a difference in swaying anyone's opinion. Some might think this late in the election, running those ads isn't really going to change anyone's minds. They might already be made up, but at the same time, I'm sure they have to spend their money. But do you think it'll make a difference?
Definitely, and this may be my perspective just as a college student, but I think there's been a lot of frustration with political attack ads this year. Every football game, every Sunday I've been watching, it's been crazy. And I think maybe that if you see one ad that you particularly don't like, that can affect a voter's decision, even make a choice not to vote for either candidate based off those types of ads, for sure.
Yeah, I will be interested in voter turnout to see, because I have heard of a lot of people saying they don't want to vote say we have these two candidates that aren't, supported by a ton of people, like especially people in the middle. So it'll be interesting to see how many people just choose to stay out of it, I guess, and wipe their hands of American politics for this election season.
Yeah, to that point, I've seen a lot of voters that say they're only voting for one candidate just because of how much they don't like the other candidate. Have you seen that happen also?
Oh, 100%. And I know, especially Trump is a very volatile political, public persona person. So I'm sure he's getting a lot of hate, but, as much as Democrats like to say, like, Harris is clearly the lesser of two evils and things like that, clearly people have very, very strong feelings on her.
For sure. I've seen a lot of Trump voters that have come out and blatantly said that the reason why they're voting for Trump in this election cycle is just because they don't like Harris, which for two candidates that are made out to be so polarizing is an incredibly interesting way to make a vote.
Any of this has to do with the fact, because looking back at Hillary Clinton's run for office, she did take a very forward stance on promoting the fact that she was a woman, she was for women, vote for your daughter, things like that. So people saw her and immediately thought, okay, first woman president. So you could say some people didn't vote for her because of that. Kamala took a different approach. She's trying to not highlight that as much, but do you still think that maybe her gender and her race might be giving some people pause before voting for her?
I definitely think that's possible. This is something we're going to be talking about later tonight. We have a segment talking about the gender gap and talking about how race may have impacted the election. But I think it's something that maybe people won't say, or people don't necessarily believe that they believe, but it's something that maybe is pushing them in a direction. That's certainly possible.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And in a special announcement, we just want to say happy birthday to Lars. Thanks for sharing your mom with us all the time. We appreciate it. Happy 10th birthday. Have a great night.
We're going to head to break right now. We're going to put up a graphic during the break.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so much work.
Go, go. Okay.
All right.
I need a. Good. Hello, I'm Rachel with Hood College Broadcasting. Who am I here with?
I'm here with I'm Guan.
Nice to meet you.
Yep, nice to
How
meet
did you vote today?
I did vote yes in the morning.
Okay,
Yeah.
what was the process like?
It was quite quick. I went in. There was somebody handing out like flyers for like school board of education and stuff like that. But so I took a paper and I went in, and then all I had to do was tell them my name, my birthday, my street address, and they were like, "Okay, you're good to go." And then I had to choose between doing paper ballot or on the screen. So I chose paper ballot, and then I found a booth, wrote in all the candidates and stuff like that, or put in the bubbles, and then I just had to give it to I had to put it into a machine. And then I got a sticker after that. So yeah,
Nice.
it was quite simple. It took like, I don't know, like 10 minutes maybe. So
So you don't have the sticker on?
I do not have. I actually lost it because I kept it in my pocket, but then I lost it somewhere. So it might be in my car. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Is there a reason you chose the paper ballot over the electronic ballot?
I don't really have a particular reason. I was just like, I don't know. I guess I just like to fill it in with a pen or pencil. So I was like, yeah. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, but at least I can say I was on TV.
Where'd Olivia go?
Oh, Olivia, she's at volleyball practice.
Oh.
She'll give you like 10:30 maybe. That's
Whoa.
I know, that's not really she can get here. Let's say.
No demographic segment today.
What'd you say?
It's gonna be
No. Dang, we're here till 11:30.
I think we're just really talking about
Trust me.
You have not seen someone consume sugar like I do on
Oh my
election night.
god. Honestly, I get it.
Austin. We're back with Hood Broadcasting, and this is my co-anchor.
Hi, my name is Megan Moeller. I am a law major. What are you, Maggie?
I am a political science major.
Perfect.
Lucky to be here tonight.
I know, it's a great opportunity to be able to do this.
Yes, for sure. We're going to take a look at some of the current election results. If you take a look at our map. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to pinpoint was in Vermont, Bernie Sanders is actually leading right now, 64.9% to Gerald Malloy, and there's 53% reporting in Vermont right now. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is pretty funny. Like, that had to have been a random submission. That's
We're also going to take a look at some of the Senate results. If you could scroll down a little bit to the sidebar, there is some of the Senate results reporting now. In Florida, we have 55.7% with 92% reporting for Republican Rick Scott. In our own state of Maryland, we have Larry Hogan reporting for the Republican Party, 71.5%. However, there's only 1% reporting, so we still have some time to go there, Megan.
Yeah, we definitely do, but it is crazy that it's already being pulled that Larry Hogan has 71% since we are a very Democratic state.
Mm-hmm.
But in Ohio right now, Bernie Moreno is leading with 48.7% with 46% reporting, sorry. And in PA, Bob Casey, which is the Democratic Party, is leading with 65.5% with 14% reporting. What else have you found, Maggie?
Speaking of Pennsylvania, I think Pennsylvania is going to be really important, obviously, as we saw in the last election, with that coming down to a big factor to who our winner was.
For sure.
So I would like to scroll back, and if you look at PA, Bob Casey, like you said, is winning in the Senate right now. But again, there's only 15% of reported votes in PA. And in PA, it's a little bit different how the mail-in system votes. I don't know if you've heard of that, have you?
I haven't heard of that. What is that all about?
So basically, in PA, they count the mail-in votes last. Interesting,
That's
right?
interesting. You would think they would count them first.
Right, exactly. So it might be a little bit of a turnover. I mean, last year we didn't get those results till Saturday after the election.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yes, we're hoping for some quick results though tonight.
For sure.
Okay, I think this would be a good time to go over our segment. We're going to talk a little bit about the Democratic Party nominee, Kamala Harris, who is our current vice president. Megan, did you have any questions for me about that?
Yeah. Are you able to tell me a little bit about her like political background and like where she comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, the Democratic nominee is Kamala Harris. Harris has previously served in the U.S. Senate and as the Attorney General of California. In her personal life, Harris was born to an African-American father and Indian mother, later making her the first female, first Asian American, and first African American to hold the vice presidential post. As a young woman, Harris attended Howard University and HBCU. There, she served on the debate team and in student office. After obtaining her bachelor's in political science and economics, she earned her JD from the University of California's College of Law.
I really wonder how growing up as like Asian American descent and like the first African American to hold vice presidential post, I wonder how that shaped her views and her way of going about things. What do you think about that?
Right, Kamala Harris is certainly a woman of many firsts. First, she is the first female vice president, the first Indian American vice president, and the first African American vice president. As a senator, Harris was also the first Indian American and second African American woman to be elected to that office. She served on several Senate committees, including the Senate Judiciary Committee, leading to her infamous questioning of now Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
Thanks for that, Maggie. And now, obviously, her time in the U.S. Senate was rather brief, but pretty memorable. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, it's worth noting that she had a short tenure, but it was pretty impactful. She had her infamous questioning moment of Brett Kavanaugh, which was a pretty famous clip as it was going on. If you've seen that, have you seen that?
I have not actually seen that.
No, she was pretty tough on him, and it was a big moment, especially for Democratic voters, in the 2020 election who were looking at the Supreme Court and thinking about who the next president would be if there were going to be potential appointments.
For sure, for sure. Anything else about her Senate race? Or not race, but like in office?
Yeah. I kind of want to switch over to her tenure as vice president.
Gotcha.
She has been both criticized and loved as a vice president. Obviously, with all her firsts, she's met with several different lawmakers regarding the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which is a big point in her campaign, as we know. She has also been pertinent about supporting the Right to Vote Act, or the Freedom to Vote Act, excuse me. Have you heard about that?
I have heard about that.
Yes, so that's a very important piece of legislation, especially during election times. And it's also worth noting that on the right side, she's been criticized with her position and agenda regarding the crisis at the southern border. They have been consistently criticized across the political aisle as well.
To go back to her Senate race, that was quite memorable. And if viewers remember, Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault, and that is when Senator Harris addressed that issue, as well as abortion in her passionate but direct questioning. And she was, of course, then asked to be Biden's running mate. Do you think that had anything to do with Biden wanting her as his running mate?
Absolutely. I think that Harris's political ideology aligns with Biden, as well as, you know, her push for women's rights, her push for abortion rights, her rigorous questioning of Brett Kavanaugh. And I think that also on the campaign strategy-wise, Biden was pretty unpopular as another white Democrat.
For sure.
So I think that Kamala Harris, with all her firsts, you know, being the first Indian American vice president, being the first African American vice president, and of course the first female vice president, really gave Biden an edge in the 2020 election.
For sure, I totally agree with that. So would you say it's fair to say she received a lot of like mixed reviews and mixed like propositions of her?
Absolutely, yeah. As vice president, she's been both criticized because of staff turnover, her actions with the border, and some other things regarding her interviews, I would say, if you're talking to people on the Republican side of the aisle. This hasn't necessarily helped or hurt her campaign, in my opinion, and it really does pose the question, do vice presidents really matter? What do you think, Megan?
I think they matter in some instances because for what the president candidate could be lacking, they could come up with that difference and make them seem like more trustworthy because they have someone backing them that's able to make up for that weakness.
Right, and I think you see that on Trump's side with
for sure
with J.D. Vance. I mean, Trump obviously comes from money; he's well known. J.D. Vance comes from a poor family in Ohio. Obviously, very different. He didn't used to support Trump, so I think that on the same way with Tim Walz, it's sort of a strategy. They sort of balance each other out. Do you
For
think?
sure, yeah. I think Walz was a very strategic choice for Harris because he is seen as a father. He's a swim coach. You're part of the swim team. You'll know that. But he was a swim coach. He's a father of 2 kids, I'm pretty sure. And he's also was a football coach. So I feel like that also gives him more humility, and as well as like seen as like a family man. So more of a like familiar face.
Yeah, for sure. Tim Walz to me is sort of that dad figure that people
Definitely.
talk about. I know that with us Gen Zers, people really have gravitated towards him.
For
He's
sure.
pretty funny and likable, and I think he really does bring something to Harris's campaign.
He definitely does. On that track, if Harris wins tonight, what do you think her presidency would, why would it be historic?
Okay, yeah, no, it would absolutely be historic. Whether you voted for her or not, it is worthwhile to acknowledge that she would be the first female, second African American, and first Asian American president to take office. Throughout her short campaign, she's been criticized for the pursuit of potentially far-left policies, not being able to answer questions during interviews, and her actions as VP within certain failures of the Biden presidency. However, her constituents are hoping her campaign has created enough of separation from Biden's presidency while remaining hopeful, her career and vast difference from Trump will lead to her victory tonight. And adding on that, I think, a separation from Trump, who obviously with younger voters is pretty, I would say, unpopular.
For sure.
A vast difference is probably important. I mean, I know I've seen even Kamala Harris's outreach on TikTok, which
Oh my
is
gosh,
very
yeah.
popular among young voters. She has really taken over the media side of it, and I think that that's something the left does really strongly, or at least the Democratic Party does really strongly.
Yeah, they for sure reach out to the the Gen Z population and the population that's like all over social media.
Mm-hmm.
She's been all over my For You page. I won't even lie.
Yes, no, absolutely, same. And I think it's worthwhile to note, because part of campaigning, and when deciding if campaigns really do matter, is media outreach, is marketing. Obviously, there's other parts to it, money and endorsements and things like that, but especially to young voters, I think that marketing is a really important part of the election.
For sure. And like as most of our viewers know, Biden dropped out in late July. What do you think that did for her candidacy, being the one that was incumbent to step up into his place and potentially give the Democrats a hopeful light in a very difficult and scary time, because we didn't know?
Right. I mean, I think even when you look at Biden's numbers versus Kamala's numbers, immediately when you when it switched over, when Biden dropped out, I think that the wide consensus among the Democratic Party beforehand was that there was no hope and that it was going to be a Trump presidency, because Biden was so unpopular.
Yeah.
Obviously, questions of his consciousness or ability to serve as president have been called into question. And I think the element that Kamala brings, besides the fact that she has all these firsts, is that she's much younger than both Biden and Trump.
For sure.
And I think Americans are sort of tired of the older guard coming in, and I think that Kamala Harris, to a lot of younger voters especially, looks more fresh, she looks new, and she looks like she's ready to take charge, and she can.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's refreshing for younger voters, especially for her more progressive views on abortion, for the women that are that's a big deal for them, and clinging to that. But I do know that a lot of people don't like that she was the picked without being in the primary. What do you think about that?
I think that the Democratic Party was sort of put in a challenging spot. I do think that there's value in the primaries.
I agree.
And to introduce voters. However, I do think that not being on the campaign trail for as long has sort of given Kamala a little bit of an edge, in my opinion, only because campaigning is long, it's hard.
It's expensive.
You're out there, you're traveling. I mean, Trump has been at campaigns speaking publicly for how many years now?
For sure.
Since his loss in 2020. Obviously, knowing he would do another campaign. But I think Kamala having the opportunity to come in fresh and with new eyes on everything, not as tired, not as worn by the campaign trail, has been a benefit for her. What do you think about that?
I totally agree with you, Maggie. She definitely, like I said, was a light at the end of the tunnel for the Democratic Party, which I think definitely did help her in her campaigning and the polling and everything like that. It was more of something for them to grab onto and say, well, she stands for what I believe in, and she didn't have to go through the vigorous campaigning and all the attack ads from the very beginning.
Right, absolutely. And I think one of Harris's big campaign strategies has been about women's rights. And
Definitely.
I definitely think that Trump being the one who appointed the justices to the Supreme Court that in turn overturned Roe v. Wade with Dobbs v. Jackson has made him sort of unpopular among younger women. And as we see right now, Harris has a majority of the female vote in the country. Do you think that that is because of the Dobbs decision?
I definitely think that's because of the Dobbs decision. A lot of women in this country are very scared right now. about the Dobbs decision and about Roe v. Wade getting overturned, and the fact that she supports the restoration of Roe v. Wade and bringing back the right for a woman to own her reproductive rights, I think that is definitely like a grapple for votes and make like having people gravitate towards her, definitely.
Absolutely, yes. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was Trump's stance on immigration. Do you think that he will be unpopular because of his views about building a wall or limiting immigration?
I think, as we saw in the previous, among Democrats, he definitely was unpopular with the thought of building the wall. And there are parts of his immigration that I, agree to disagree with, and that's every candidate, everywhere, every person. I agree that there needs to be like a process, but I do think it needs to be a more like not lenient, but easier for the people that are seeking asylum in this country and need a quick like result and a quick entry because they're unsafe where they are.
And considering Kamala Harris's policies at the southern border, where Biden left her sort of in charge, I think it'll be interesting how voters look at that issue, when they go to vote. We are out of time here. We're going to be coming back shortly, probably with some new anchors. We've enjoyed our time here. We'll be back soon, Megan, right?
Definitely.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was your process like for voting?
I voted online just because I'm here, but it was pretty good, pretty interesting. Just wanted just to make sure I put my vote in and it was just part of everybody else.
Okay. And was there like a whole process for registering to vote online?
It was this thing called like the about ballot or something like that. So I just filled that out, asked why I'm not able to register when I'm home, and I said I'm a student, so just did that.
Did you vote in the election 4 years ago?
Yes, I did.
So what process was that in person? Which process did you prefer?
I preferred, honestly, that's a good question. I honestly preferred more in person just because it's more easier and I got like the full experience.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So nervous.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is the 2024 election night. I'm Casey Rowine.
I'm William Lantry.
And we're both Hood College students, and we're reporting on the election tonight. We first wanted to start by looking at the Google map and going over some of our election results.
Now, interestingly, PA, even though we've only gotten 26% of the vote, it's going towards Harris. We have 55%, 55.4% of the vote going to Harris. That's looking good. We're looking hopeful there.
Yes, it's looking hopeful for the Democrats out there. It's very exciting. It's very surprising, I would say.
I think, it might be surprising, but we saw throughout the entire election, they were really focused on PA. They wanted that state. They knew, if we're not getting the vice presidential candidate from there, we need to secure this spot. And we're not seeing that as much with the other states, but it's still time to be hopeful. We still have, most of the states, we're seeing 33% of the vote, 20% of the vote, 3% of the vote. We don't know what's going to happen yet.
No, we
and
really
it's exciting.
Don't. It is very exciting. So it's interesting to look at some of the other swing states that we can focus on. Wisconsin, it's looking more red. It's only 11% reporting. Nevada, we don't really have any results there yet. If you actually look at most of the west side of the state, we don't really know what's going on yet. But
we'll start to get some information around 10 and 11 p.m. But
if we look back on the East Coast, if you look at North Carolina, Georgia, those are again, and actually Georgia with 75% reporting is looking like it's going to Trump. And then North Carolina with 56 reporting is looking like it's going to Trump. With only 56, I would say it's a little bit less likely, but Georgia's looking like it might end up being red tonight.
It is expected, but gosh, imagine the partying that they might be doing at the campaign office. They actually had a shot in Georgia. That's something we should be excited about. Now, North Carolina.
No, sir, you go.
North Carolina, I made a very early prediction that North Carolina was going to go blue. I wanted it a lot.
There's still hope.
There is still hope.
Only 56 reporting.
Only 56. It's a margin of what, maybe 2%. But if you remember what happened with the governor, a massive scandal. I don't think Republicans are feeling very good about the party. No. I think we're gonna see. I just saw it live. Trump's percentage went down 0.2%. I'm gonna take it though. I'm gonna say that we should be hopeful about that.
Do you think there's any other factors besides recent scandal that might turn North Carolina blue? What led you to that prediction that we might have it go blue in this election?
There's history, with Obama it going blue. I think it's close enough to the how do you say? I have my own personal beliefs about geography and that affecting voter turnout. But I think, people are slowly, Democrats are slowly encroaching on North Carolina. I think we're, in a few election cycles, who knows where North Carolina is? You know what I mean?
Honestly, it does seem like a lot of these states that have been true and true red in the past are getting more and more blue. As you said, as more people populate them, as the cities grow, as the populations grow, which does, speak to the fact that generally when, more people vote, the popular vote normally goes blue. A lot of times it just takes having more of those peoples in those cities, those more progressive liberal cities, that'll change the state.
Absolutely. In Pennsylvania, what we see is a lot of these smaller counties, as they grow in population, they start turning blue. The problem being that the people that are leaving those places, that are in those counties, they get redder. They get more hardline Republicans, moving there. They're the only ones that are left because the rest have gone to the cities. And so it's this interesting problem.
Do you feel like it's making us more polarized the more people are moving away from the people they don't like? Do you think that's having consequences?
We are constantly talking about polarization and how worse it's getting. There was Biden recently on this, what was it? It was I know it was live. It was for Voto Latina, I think. And he said, you know, as he was talking about that, about Trump's, where did the Knicks play? Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
About his rally there. He and the Puerto Rico joke. Once Biden's reaction to it was to call the Trump reporter or to the Trump voters. What was it? Something very like the only garbage I'm seeing is his supporters, and it's so unfortunate. You know, he was the president 4 years ago that was saying, you know, I will be the president for everybody. I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide but unify. And I think that's something important. I think, you know, if we really, if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, and if you want to win these elections, you need to be partisan in a way. You just need to grow and suck it up and accept it. You know what I mean?
I 100% agree. I do think it's important, but I do think, kind of like you were alluding to, it's maybe not the wisest choice to knock down your opposer's supporters, because, you know, what if one day they're no longer Trump voters, they're no longer Republican, but then they get the sense of this elitist Democratic liberals, because they do often tend to talk down about the other side. And
yeah, you know, it's a problem. If you're a Democrat, I feel like you do have a responsibility to a certain extent to be aware of what, you know, Republicans are thinking. We need Republican voters sometimes.
100%.
We absolutely do. When someone like Trump is in office, the Democrats need to get some of these people on their side. And saying stuff like that about them. If you were voting and the candidate said something bad about you, you'd remember it.
100%. I would take it personally. I wouldn't ever want to vote for them.
Exactly.
I might not even want to vote for their party. So it is just interesting in these times. We see it from both sides. I would say both parties end up alienating the other side when, like you said, they're going to need those voters.
Now, I would just like to bring this up. Walz has been, you know, pretty, you know, the Democrats see him as this very happy, you know, father-like guy. He's doing well with white Democratic families. But he's been very divisive, oddly. You know, we see him making insults about Vance and Elon Musk. He's been able to talk a lot more openly than Harris has been able to.
Yeah, he's not quite as poised as her, and maybe it becomes, you know, like obviously he has a history in politics, not quite as long though, and you know, he is seen to be like, oh, a guy's guy. Like he coached football, he was in the National Guard, things like that. So it's like, he's not holding back like a lot of other Democrats do, which, you know, again, could be them trying to use him and his appeal to some maybe more independent voters, or, you know, even close the gender gap and get more guys on board. But I don't know how well it's actually working for them.
Yeah, you know, and you know, this is we see a similarity in the Republican Party as well. We you know, Trump is kind of after his, like, you know, they're eating the dogs quote. He slowed down, but he's allowed Vance to kind of push forward the Republican ideas. And you know, it could be said that you know, we want our candidates to be these, you know, not holy figures, but we don't want them to mess up. But if a vice president says something, if he pushes the line a little bit, maybe it's a little. Have you noticed that?
Oh, I 100% agree. It seems kind of like you said, it's a little bit more forgivable when the vice president makes a mistake like that or pushes the boundaries. And it might even let them get those thoughts out and kind of appeal to those more partisan, more extreme people who are having these thoughts and almost feel represented. Like I think especially with Vance, he's a lot more extreme. He's seemed as a lot more far right almost than Trump, which is a little bit surprising. But I'm sure there's people on the right who are looking for someone exactly like that, and they want to hear those thoughts articulated by someone that they can vote for.
Absolutely.
Do you think that each candidate, do you think Trump and Kamala both made a good decision in who they chose as their vice president?
I actually think about this a lot. You know, when we were first introduced to these candidates, you know, in the first few months, we saw Vance as this little guy. The first image I ever saw of him was those kids like hugging him as he gave them like school lunches. The first time I heard about Vance was about his couch story. And, you know, I think there was so much strategy that must have been involved in picking these candidates. We saw a ton of that being reported about I remember a news headline, the 7 strategies Kamala can go for, with all the 7 states that she was going to pick. But, you know, we really, maybe it went over my head. Maybe I didn't notice. But it seemed like the Republican Party was making a very different decision when they picked Vance than when they picked Walz. I think, you know, it might go to say that Trump was secure in the fact, maybe he thought he was going to win, and so he's planning for the future. He wants a successor, maybe, the same way that Biden did. And he says, okay, I have this agenda, and I have this agenda that I want to be in the next election. He's going to say the next election agenda, and then he's going to run. Because, I mean, do you think Donald Trump is going to run again? Or not even going to, what am I saying?
I mean, no, that's an interesting point. He seems to have quite a lot of money, quite a lot of resources. If he doesn't win this election, he very well could. But more on that later. Let's take another look at our Google map showing our election results. So looking more, Pennsylvania is up to 32% reporting. We still have Kamala leading, 52% she has, and Donald Trump has 47%. Some of our other swing states, Wisconsin now is going for Kamala. She has 51%. It's only 22% reporting, but that is taken by the blue. Georgia is still red, and it's looking like it's going to stay that way. We have 77% reporting. Donald Trump's only leading by about a 5-point margin, but it does seem like it's going in his favor. And then recent update, Maryland has been called. Maryland's going to go to Kamala Harris. I don't think this is a surprise for anyone. It's kind of what we expected to see. Maryland is blue and blue. And then I also think it looks like for the Maryland Senate seat, Angela Alsobrooks is leading.
Yeah, it's not that surprising. You know, we all live in Maryland. We know it's a blue state.
I do think I think a lot of people thought there could have been a chance if any Republican was going to win in Maryland, it could have been Larry Hogan. He had a lot of success as governor. He has a lot of support. I know Democrats personally who actually told me they are voting for Larry Hogan just because of the good job he did as governor.
Yeah, you know, he did do a good. I think you're right. You know, if any Republican was going to win, it's definitely going to be him. It's interesting to see that. You know, he needs to play along with these, you know, political games a lot more and play with the Democrats a lot more, simply because, you know, he can't fall back on a lot of these, you know, he isn't always, you know, gonna do what the Republican Party wants him to do. He's gonna speak his own opinion. And I don't know, I find it hard, like we were talking about the divisiveness of our current political climate is, I think, just too much. I think even someone like Larry Hogan, who makes attempts to go across the aisle, to open his mind, I just don't think it's possible at a certain point.
No, I don't think it's enough. Unfortunately, it's almost upsetting to see that everyone is talking about wanting an independent. They want someone talking across the aisle. But when it comes to voting, it's not quite that sentiment. When you're thinking of who's going to be voting in the Senate representing Maryland, most people are thinking, well, if I'm a Democrat, I want someone blue. I don't care if I think maybe Hogan would do a better job. I'm thinking about the Senate vote. And I know a lot of people have said, you know, Maryland might not be the thing to change this, the Democratic majority in the Senate. We have other races going. I believe West Virginia, we have that going to a red senator. So a lot of people don't want to risk that, even though Maryland might not be the risk that they think it is.
Yeah, and you know, I remember Angela Alsobrooke's campaign was really hammering that in, and I think, you know, stuff like that really does stay with voters. If you the thing you hear first is usually the thing you remember the most, and if, you know, voters are going in, they're thinking, oh, I'm voting to keep my reproductive rights. It's hard to ask them, hey, I know I don't have a good track record of this, but Larry Hogan needs to say, I'm going to protect your rights.
It's hard
just
to,
not,
I would say, I'm sure it's hard to believe him. Like you
it's
said,
hard to
when
believe,
looking
it's hard
back at
to,
his track record.
yeah.
But we'll have to see. So we'll come back to our map a little bit later and update you guys more. And then let's go to a break for a minute. Okay.
Good? Go ahead. Okay, hello, we're here live for Hood College Broadcasting. Who am I here with?
My name is Thelma Moeller.
Okay, and what brings you here tonight?
My granddaughter is in the program. And of course, I'm so proud of her, so I had to come here and see her.
Okay.
Right? She did an excellent job.
Okay, and what age did you last vote?
About 8 years ago. And I'm 90, so that would have been 82, right?
Okay, and how has the voting process changed like over time, do you think?
Immensely. Number one, when we voted, you went to different places. You didn't go to a school or like they do now. You went to a hardware store or any place that would set it up, and that's where you voted. And of course, you went into a little cubicle that was almost completely enclosed, and you didn't push buttons, you wrote everything down. So it was quite different.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh, there's echo, echo, echo. I am here in the studio doing a little vlog. I have the control room with me. And Aaron, what is your role?
I am the camera person for tonight.
And what importance is that?
Well, in order to watch this, you need someone to videotape it, so that's me.
What he said. Who am I here with?
I'm Sophia, and I'm doing the switcher. So basically, I'm switching between the graphics to the camera, and you can see all of our different camera options here. So we're switching throughout the segment to go to different cameras to zoom in on people and to switch to our graphics to see the election results.
Very important part we have here. And I'm going to mosey on over this way to the brains behind the operation.
Oh, God.
What is your name?
I am Professor Tim Jacobson.
And what are you doing here?
Kind of keeping everybody in line and running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Why is that?
There's just a lot of moving parts. So this is the first time we've ever done this before. And we're kind of, somewhat flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah.
But so far, it's been a great success. Karen's, Professor Robinson's students have been doing a great job. We've 226 people have been watching on the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 25 people out in the lounge area. So yeah, I think it's been a really great experience. I think for my students, for the Hood College Broadcasting students, but also for the political science students.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to mosey on over this way. If we could get a zoom over here. Who am I here with?
I am Dr. Karen Robinson in the Political Science Department.
Okay, and how important is this night for you?
Oh, it is what this semester has been about for these students, and I'm super excited to experience history with the next generation, and I look forward to processing this exercise with them tomorrow. But it's been super fun to get to know you all and to see what you do and just to spend the night with my students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we're all happy here to form the connection and hopefully continue doing things together in the studio.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you soon.
welcome back to Hood College's coverage of the 2024 U.S. elections. I'm Alejandro Munoz.
I'm Maggie Ralston.
And we are going to take a look back at the map of the United States to see where we are as far as the count. If we could pull that up. We have right now Harris with 99 electors and Donald Trump with 198. Not a whole lot to be surprised about when looking at all the states that have been called. Some interesting ones, if we look down to Georgia, we'll see that they are at 81% reporting with Donald Trump up 52.2% to 47.2% to Kamala Harris, which will be pivotal for a Trump victory. And we'll see if Kamala will be able to turn that around. Any reactions?
I think it's going to be super important to see how Pennsylvania goes. I mean, Pennsylvania, it looks like it's leaning blue right now, I want to say. But again, if you look back at the 2020 election, Pennsylvania was obviously super important to both candidates, and that's why Biden was able to pull off that victory in 2020. I think it's also going to be interesting to look at some of the places where candidates campaigned, especially in those swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, and see where people have decided to vote at. What are you thinking?
These are the key states. Whatever happens with these states is going to decide who wins this election. I have my eye on Virginia, looking at it with 64% going, and we're at 49.6 to 48.7. Typically a blue state, so who knows? There could be some surprise upsets, but I do believe that these 7 states are the pivotal deciders to who will win this election.
Right, and I think that we shouldn't assume anything here, right?
Certainly not.
These
Certainly
two
not.
candidates surely have a lot under their plate. I mean, Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and,
That's right.
and
That's
Kamala
right.
Harris is certainly a woman of many firsts. I know we talked about in our segment earlier. If she won, she would be the first Indian American, first female, and second Black American president, which I think is super important and has sort of given her an edge in this election. What do you think?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a lot on the line here. Not to mention Trump coming back if he were to win for a non-consecutive second term. And looking at how the demographic shifts are going, looking at what the polls are saying about young voters, about women voters focused on reproductive rights, there's a lot in the air. There's a lot of different factors to be considered. We don't know where it's going to go.
Absolutely, and I think you bring up a good point, reproductive rights. If we go back to Maryland, where we are at right now, and if you want to pull up that graphic, the voters have decided about abortion in Maryland. Maryland voters have decided that abortion should remain legal and reproductive freedom should remain protected in the state of Maryland. Any reactions, Alejandro?
Not surprised. Abortion access is pretty good here in Maryland, so not surprising for them to enshrine it, but definitely a step forward for those who are looking to protecting reproductive rights.
Right, and if you look at the poll itself, it definitely indicates that a large majority of Maryland voters did vote to enshrine this right into Maryland law, and I think that it's not surprising how Maryland has gone overall in this election with some of the views in the state. And Maryland is a traditionally blue state.
Right, and it is going with a general shift in the U.S. demographic towards more approval towards reproductive rights and enshrining abortion. So should not be surprised by that. And when we have other red states that are going in that direction too, it could be pointing towards a progressive future for the U.S. But we'll see.
Right, absolutely. And I think that brings us to the 6th district, which we at Hood have had sort of a big role in. We held, I would know, yes. We held a forum here a couple months ago with the 2 candidates, April McLean-Delaney and Neil Parrott. Right now, that race is pretty tight. And earlier tonight, April Delaney actually had the edge. But as we're seeing, as we were last updated, if we would like to pull up that graphic, the Neil Parrott has taken over in Maryland, or in the 6th district rather, if that's still looking correct. I know.
Yeah, it's at 51.1% to 48.9% Parrott to Delaney, and that's with 56.3% of the votes in. So it is still up in the air, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's interesting being a Maryland resident driving through. You will see a lot of Neil Parrott signs. They're bright, they're green, they got stars on them. You'll see them. Not sure if I'm seeing as many Abram McLean Delaney signs. So we'll see if campaign and advertising will be a factor, and then certainly the debate between the two.
Yes, that was very interesting. I was lucky enough to be there and to be one of the moderators for the debate, and it certainly was an experience.
Explosive.
It was certainly explosive, yes. There were equal amounts of supporters there, I would say. Neil Parrott supporters came in their green shirts, and Abram McLean Delaney's family was there. She had tons of support there. At the end, there was sort of a big disruptive moment. I think that a lot of the questions asked were really important to those in the election. I think one of the things that was sort of skipped over, unfortunately, was those reproductive rights, which we see Maryland voters have decided on, one, and two, that's a big national issue. And that's certainly been a big issue for Kamala Harris as well.
That's right.
I mean, again, with Trump appointing the justices that handed down the Dobbs decision, I think that Kamala has certainly used that as an edge to appeal to female voters and to appeal to more progressive voters.
Certainly. And it's going to be a question of whether female voters are going to be turn out in as large of a margin in favor of Kamala in order to give her an edge against Donald Trump. But, you know, it really is up to these key swing states, because we do live by rule of the Electoral College. So it is up to that rule to see who's going to take this.
Yes, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the popular vote turns out as well, even though obviously the Electoral College gives us our decision. But it's always interesting to see the differential between the popular vote and how people in cities vote versus how it ends up in rural and suburban areas, which I think Trump specifically has tried to appeal to. However, I do want to talk about Harris's appeal to middle-class voters, and I think she has been very focused on affordable housing and supporting the Affordable Care Act. How have you seen that through her campaign?
It's the key point. I mean, she is reaching out to the moderates within these swing states. That is one of the main key voting blocks that she's going to need to attract in order to win the election.
Right, and her appeal certainly has had to she's had to separate herself from Biden a little bit. And I think a problem with conservative voters and Harris is that she's seen as too liberal, too far left. But I think she's done a pretty good job in her campaign of sort of separating herself from Biden, but remaining that middle ground Democrat. And going back to Maryland, Larry Hogan, we're going to talk about the Senate races. Larry Hogan has certainly been a middle-of-the-road Republican himself. He has not supported Trump. He's supported some more liberal policies. How do you see his election going? And we can absolutely pull up that graphic as well.
That's right. Well, Alsobrooks is up 52.6% to Larry Hogan's 45%. And that should not necessarily be surprising when we are living in a blue state. With that being the case, Larry Hogan, having served as the governor for a while, did give him a bit of where Republicans might not feel that they have much of a hold here. He certainly had some credibility within the state of Maryland. But it's looking like we have 67% of the votes in. She is up, so I mean, we'll have to see when it finishes up, but it's looking good for her also.
Right, and I think to your point about seeing Neil Parrott signs, you know, driving up and down the highway or even just around Frederick or near Hood, you've seen quite a bit of Republican signs, which is really surprising to me. I mean, I'm not from Maryland. I come from New Jersey, so that's a pretty blue state in itself. Yeah. So I'm pretty used to seeing Democrat signs. But for such a blue state, for Maryland, I think it's really surprising how many Parrott signs we've seen, how many Hogan signs we've seen. And I really think that points to sort of some contention between Alsobrooks and Hogan. But it does, in fact, look like Alsobrooks is up right now.
That's right. And it should not be surprising to see Neil Parrott doing well within this county, because this is a very purple county, Frederick County. But I do think that how close this race is speaking to the polarization within the country. There are, and the split in the presidential election. It's a dead heat, and it seems to be like that all around.
Absolutely, and I know that as we move through this election, and obviously last year we didn't get our full results until a few days later, it's important to, remain hopeful for whoever you voted for,
right,
and to sort of, remain kind to people even if you didn't agree with them politically. And we're actually going to talk about that later in our segment about self-care.
Yeah. Civility is important. Civility is important because we're going to have to live with whoever it is for the next 4 years. So we might as well figure out how to get along together.
We will, yes. And just taking a look back at those, the presidential results, if we want to flip back to the electoral map, we see some of the states in the West starting to get called now. I mean, the reports are slightly low, the amount of people who have actually voted is secure. Polls have typically closed by now, I want to say, in most states, but they're still counting votes. So while states certainly may look one color compared to the other, just make sure you look at who is reported. So South Dakota, for example, looks completely red, and it says 71.5% compared to 26.4% for Harris. There's only 8% of electoral votes. So just make sure you're checking your information correctly.
That's right.
I think that's really important.
Absolutely. You have to verify. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Any other reactions about any other states out, Hunter?
Not surprising. No. Colorado going blue, all these surrounding states going red. This is exactly what we expected.
Yeah.
It's these swing states which we are just clenching our seats waiting for.
Right.
These are the big ticket items.
Yes. Virginia is incredibly close right now. 49.5% for Trump, while there's 48.8% for Harris, with 65% of votes counted. How do you feel about that?
It's early. It's early. It can still switch up. Yeah, we're just gonna have to wait it out. I mean, I've spent this whole election cycle trying to predict who's gonna win, but it's been such a toss-up, and the polling has been so close all across the board that we really are just waiting to see what people decide on in the ballot box.
It seems every day there's a new poll out indicating a new result. So
that's right.
I think we're really just going to have to see how these swing states go. And speaking of some more swing states, we have 52% of votes reported. Donald Trump is up 50.5%. Harris is at 48.6%. And again, Pennsylvania, super important state, super important swing state, lots of electoral votes to consider. I think that a lot of campaigning has gone into Pennsylvania specifically.
That's right.
And it'll be really interesting to see how Pennsylvania turns out, considering how much the differential was in the last election compared to this one. And obviously it's still early. We only have just over half of votes reported, but we shall see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. I just had one pop up getting declared, but I can't find that state. But it is moving as we speak. That it is.
We're going to take a look at the Washington Post electoral map.
And we are projecting from the Washington Post that Alsobrooks is going to win that Senate election. That is Angela Alsobrooks. And I believe she will be the first black female senator from Maryland.
Wow.
Yeah.
This election certainly has the potential to have a lot of firsts. I mean, even with Trump, the first president with 34 convicted felonies. Harris, again, obviously her reputation being a woman of many firsts. That would be an incredibly historic presidency for her and for the Democratic Party. Among, I think, just female Americans in the United States, it would be quite interesting to have a female president.
It would, and it would be the first.
Mm-hmm.
But both of these candidates come with their pros and their cons.
Absolutely.
Certainly, with Vice President Harris gaining all the delegates and becoming the Democratic nominee.
Mm-hmm.
Yet having a bit of a mixed reaction in her vice presidential role. And then Donald Trump, who is a polarizing figure. Just very polarizing. And both have worked to round their image to see if they can get those voters that are still stuck between either or.
Yes, and I think one of the strategies between the candidates has been to sort of appeal to popular culture. I mean, Donald Trump appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast. Kamala Harris appeared on the Call Her Daddy podcast, if you have ever heard of that. which is a young woman's podcast. Joe Rogan obviously appeals to younger men, but both candidates have certainly tried to appeal to younger voters. And I spoke earlier about Kamala Harris's TikTok account, where she's been being very popular on TikTok, I think. I don't know if you've seen her on your For You page, but I've certainly seen her on mine.
It helps having a young demographic that uses TikTok.
It definitely
does. It certainly skews a little bit.
Yeah, and historically, a big part of the Democratic vote has been minorities and younger people. So she really has to do a good job securing those votes, especially in swing states such as Pennsylvania, which I think we should take another look back at the map. Georgia is still pretty close. We've got about 51.9% for Donald Trump and 47.4% for Kamala Harris. And there's about 82% of votes in, which is really interesting. We're starting to get through our night a little bit.
That's right. We are getting closer and closer to the end.
Yes,
some may say it's happy to be getting to the end. It's been a long election season.
Oh,
lots of surprises.
Such a long election season.
Lots of surprises.
I mean, we've been following this election. Obviously, lots of students have. Right. I think students are really excited about voting, which has been super interesting. I mean, Hood Votes here at Hood has been super helpful in getting young voters to go out and vote. And I'm really interested to see, especially in other states, how the young demographic will vote. And I think after the election, polls will come out about that, and I'm really excited to look at them.
That's right. It's very important. It's important. And as data will show, younger people are one of the demographics that are least favorable towards the government. So we want to instill in the up-and-comers who will be a part of our government, who will be citizens within this country, that they have the ability to create change through their government.
Absolutely, yes. And another thing is, a lot of people, I think, view these candidates as quite polarizing figures. I mean, obviously Trump more than Harris, but Harris certainly has her own issues when it comes to policy, her tenure as vice president. What do you think about her tenure as vice president?
As vice president, she has stuck into backing President Joe Biden while also trying to highlight the fact that she is not Joe Biden. She's working with him. She's keeping face. She is cordial. She is good at talking to people. Good at talking to the press. In a way, she's kind of taken over as the face of the administration, and certainly as someone who will be taking it forward if she wins this election.
Right.
All right.
Wow.
We are going to call Virginia for Donald Trump.
Virginia has just flipped blue for Kamala Harris.
That would be surprising.
There's about 67% of votes in. Kamala Harris is leading 49.5%, where Donald Trump is at 48.9%. This is going to be a big deal, I think. I mean, obviously Virginia, with 13 electoral votes, that's going to make a big dent in the count to 270. How are you feeling about this?
Well,
we just got this news.
Sure, not necessarily surprised. Virginia is pretty consistently a blue state. We still have another 33% of voting to go. It could switch back. It's a difference of about, let's say 10,000, give or take 8,000. So who knows? But it's looking good for Harris. So, count this as a win for her.
Yeah. And with that, we are going to take a break here. Thank you all for listening. We will be back with you shortly with some more electoral results. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Hello, I am back interviewing in the lobby here. Who am I here with?
Amber Brown,
Okay, and where are you from?
Asheville, North Carolina.
So what was the process like voting for you?
I voted by mail, so I had to buy stamps, make a copy of my photo ID, and then I sent it through the Hood College mailroom.
And what was the registration process like for that?
I filled out a form months ago to get a ballot, and then I think it was like 46 days before the election, I got it. Yeah.
Okay, and was this your first time voting?
First time in a presidential election. I voted by
Okay.
mail my freshman year.
Okay, and what was the experience like compared from your freshman year to now?
Felt like there's like a lot more pressure on it. I don't really remember that many people voting by mail for the 2022 election, but it's a big deal election, so just that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Of course.
We'll see you shortly.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Hood College's 2024 election results. I'm Casey Rowine.
And I'm Megan Moeller.
And we're going to talk about some more of the results that we've been seeing, and we're going to pull up our graphic right now. All right, so looking at a lot of our big states, Texas, Florida, they're staying red. The blue states that we thought were going to go blue are staying blue. But what we really want to look at is some of our swing states. Megan, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So as of right now, Donald Trump is leading in Georgia with a 51.2%, with Harris at 48.1%, with 88% reporting. So it's seeming that that's going to stay red, but that easily could change. North Carolina currently Donald Trump is leading with 50%, with 84% reporting. And Virginia is neck and neck. Harris is leading with 49.5%. While Donald Trump has 48.9%. So it's very close, with 70% reporting. PA did start to lean right. So Donald Trump has 51% with 57% reporting, and Harris has 48.1%. As well as...
I mean, if we look over at Arizona, that one is also leaning red, or actually it's exactly tied. We have 49.6% of the votes for each candidate. Only 50% is reporting, so that could go either way, but I'll be very interested to see how that goes. And then I'll be interested when we can start getting results from places like Nevada on the West Coast and see how that turns out. Megan, what do you think are the big issues in these swing states that might be determining how people vote?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you, but I know a lot of the college towns in these swing states are not pulling like they did in 2020. Harris is doing a little bit worse than Biden did with these college towns. Do you have a suspicion of why that is?
I would be interested to see why. Maybe a lot of these college-aged kids and people in these towns aren't getting out to vote like we need them to for Harris. Maybe, oh, Biden had, a bigger pull for them. But I also think what we can look at really is a big issue affecting a lot of people in college is the Palestine-Israel issue. I think a lot of these college kids might be clearly upset with both candidates on this issue. They want to see something done, maybe a little bit more progressive, more in terms of supporting Palestine, and they might not feel like either candidate is doing this, so they might not be voting at all, and that might be hurting Harris.
For sure, yeah. I feel like a lot of people, I mean, completely don't know what is the complete right thing to do. I mean, because it's really hard to know the right thing to do in those situations.
Yeah.
Because what's right for one is not right for others. So I do think that that's definitely could be hurting Harris, for sure.
I 100% agree. But if you are a Democrat, some good news. Larry Hogan has dropped out of the Senate race, so Angela Alsobrooks will officially be the new Maryland senator, which is very exciting. We're going to have a African-American woman in our Senate for the first time, which could be, hopefully leading to maybe a first African-American woman president, but we'll just have to see on that. Again, Maryland is a blue state through and through. We're not surprised.
Right.
I would say also Brooks won. There's no real news there.
Right, and that's the first African-American woman in the Senate for Maryland, right?
Right. In other news though, Illinois just went blue.
Colorado also just went blue.
Okay, very exciting. So Megan, what do you think, people's reactions might be after this election? Do you expect something as maybe intense as our last one, a whole January 6th? Do you think people have calmed down from that?
I would not say that people have calmed down. I see a lot of rhetoric of Republicans being upset if Harris wins and the possible stolen election again. They're very worried about that. As well as with the mail-in ballots, they're not trusted by the right, and that could definitely hurt Harris because they're more aligned with Trump's views in this.
100%. I do think the addition to mail-in ballots has changed our elections forever at this point. Obviously, they really became popular, or not even popular, but needed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and now it just gives all these people a whole other option how they're going to vote in elections. It could really help some demographics of voters to be able to get there if people are working 12-hour shifts, if people feel like they can't get off in time to get to the polling stations. Now they have a different option, but like you said, it does seem clear we're going to see this more in Democratic voters versus Republicans. But do you think Republican politicians maybe need to change the attitudes of their voters and try to get them to use these mail-in ballots more, and that could potentially get them more votes in the future?
I do think so, because I've heard a lot of people say that they weren't going to vote for X, Y, Z. I've heard a lot of people say they weren't voting because they didn't trust mail-in ballots and they were not in the state that their residency is in. This is especially important for college students that are out of state and can't get home, and funds
100%.
can't get home to vote, and they might not be able to vote. So I think that it really just depends on all of that. But I did have a question. What do you think about the thought of people thinking mail-in ballots are going to get lost and all those kind of things?
I mean, I think it's a fair question. Even I did a mail-in ballot. It's hard not to think, where is this going to end up? I think it just doesn't feel as secure as going down to your local voting location and doing it right there in person. You know what's going to happen. You know what's going to work. But at the same time, I think, it can be said for a lot of things in government. People need to have trust in their government. They need to have trust in their politicians that these things are going to get done correctly, because if we don't have faith in our voting system, more and more people are going to stop voting. And then what is that going to say about America?
I agree.
All right, and we're going to take another break, and then we'll be back with 2 new anchors. It's like
Welcome back to Hood College Broadcasting. I'm Umrit Brown.
And I'm Olivia Todd.
It's a little after 11, and we have about 25 or 30 more minutes left of the broadcast. We really appreciate you all joining us today. We're going to kick it off real quick with just a few updates on the electoral map. And we're going to bring the election results up on the screen right now. We just started getting polls back the election results just called Washington and California for Kamala Harris. That's not a surprise. And we have gotten a couple more updates in some swing states. Right now, Wisconsin is 60% reporting, and Donald Trump leads by about 2%. Michigan is 27% reporting, and Trump leads by about 4%, and Pennsylvania is about 70%, with Trump leading by about 3%. North Carolina is up to 86% reporting, and Trump leads by about 3%. Olivia, could you tell me a little bit more about what might help decide North Carolina as we come down to the very end?
Yes. So you see, North Carolina is one of the key 7 swing states. In 2020, it really only came down to a few thousand votes that determined who won North Carolina. I will say that polls are showing that areas that were hit really hard by Hurricane Helene were outpacing early voting. And so we can see that kind of favors Trump. There was a lot of also misinformation and anger over how fast federal aid was coming for FEMA. So I think that will have an effect in how these Western North Carolina votes in this 2024 election.
That makes sense. Early voting and mail-in ballots will definitely play a huge role in the outcome of this election. I do also want to point out that Trump does have a clear path to victory in 3 states that he is currently winning. Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania do total the amount of electoral votes that Trump needs to win. While Pennsylvania is very close, we're about 70% reporting, so Trump does have a good shot to win. Earlier today, we talked about the blue wall in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Right now, all 3 of those states are red. Do you think that flips soon, or do you think it remains that way?
I think it's going to be, and I hate to say that it's really going to come to, a few thousand votes, but I really think it's too early to tell. As we can see, we saw Pennsylvania go from red to blue and then back over to red. I think that similar to 2020, we really probably most likely won't know tonight, and it's going to come down to the last few thousand ballots being counted.
That definitely makes sense. Olivia has done some research on some specific voter groups that are going to play a big role in this election. So, Olivia, why are black voters important in this election?
Well, black voters, there's about 34, in this year, in 2024, there's 34 million eligible black voters in this election, and with making up 14% of all eligible voters. Black voters have been a really key demographic and coalition for Democrats historically, but we have seen that Trump's favorability among black voters has increased since the 2020 election from 8% to 11%. And so if you're Harris and her campaign, it's a little bit troubling to see how Trump has only improved in the black voters instead of decreasing, despite maybe even some racial gaffes that has happened over the campaign. Before Biden dropped out, black voters had showed a decrease and a 10-point drop in approval rating from 83% in 2021 to 74% in March of 2023. And so I think really when she entered the race, I think there was a really big strategy and emphasis on attracting these black voters, stopping kind of the bleed that's been happening from the Democratic Party, and really trying to figure out why are black voters leaving the Democrats.
That makes sense. In class this year, we've discussed how specifically black men have also identified with Trump during this election, potentially voicing some of their frustration with America over the last 4 years. Could you tell me a little about how each campaign has tried to appeal to black voters during the election, what strategies they've used?
Yeah. So I think maybe why Trump has increased in black
support is that he's really hit on using the economy to target black men. He has kind of claimed that undocumented immigrants are taking black jobs. Has been a term that's been referenced very often by both Democrats now and Republicans, trying to also capitalize on that term, even though economists have found that this is unproven. He also has used black Republican congressmen like Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt, who have helped him on the campaign trail. Byron Donalds hosted a black men's barbershop in October in Philadelphia. So I think those are also really key surrogates to kind of increase his favorability on the campaign trail. And I think lastly, he attended the National Association of Black Journalists in August, which did make several headlines, and maybe not for necessarily good reasons, because he was criticized for several insensitive racial comments, one of them being saying that he's the best president for black since Abraham Lincoln, and also then started to question Harris's racial identity by saying that she turned black. And so you can kind of argue whether he has made positive gains in this campaign with the black voters with that, but it's kind of, again, it's going to come down really tonight. I will say swing states like North Carolina, like Georgia, have heavy black populations, and so it's really interesting to see how, if they even turn out one, I think, and then for who are they really believing is going to be the best candidate for them. And with Harris, her strategy, she kind of kicked off her presidential campaign at her HBCU, Howard, and now she's ending it tonight at Howard University. And so she has used Barack Obama and Michelle Obama on her campaigns, especially Barack Obama with having him speak to black men like at their Atlanta rally. She also has been using this phrase called opportunity economy, and in October she released a full-on agenda called Opportunity Economy for Black Men, which would include a plan for providing $1 million in forgivable loans of up to $20,000 to black entrepreneurs to help them start their businesses. And so I think she's trying to try to stop the bleeding from the economy side, and really try to appeal to black voters in this election.
Definitely, and it'll be really interesting to see after the election's over how black voters turned out for both Trump and for Harris. In Georgia specifically, black men make up the largest percent of the electorate of any swing state, so it'll be really interesting to see how they turn out in Georgia, and if they have how much of an effect they have on the election. I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about female voters. That demographic is being under intense scrutiny, especially because this may be our first female president. Could you tell me a little bit about how Trump and Harris have appealed to female voters this election cycle?
Yeah, certainly. So Harris is kind of framing her election on what is deemed as a woman's issue, which is on abortion. That's really been her way to frame her campaign and to rally women voters. If I can show a graphic historically, or in this election, we'll show a 14-point gap, the largest in history, where women prefer Democrats than men. I think this is really significant, and again, I think it might be alarming to Republicans to also figure out what are we doing wrong with appealing to women. Are we losing on the abortion issue, or is there general other issues that we are losing women on? But abortion has been, Harris has a 20-point lead over Trump on the issue of abortion, and she has really corralled, I think, a coalition across the political spectrum on kind of protecting reproductive rights, and kind of even among conservatives, because it's like, because the policy agenda maybe has gone too far or extreme, or they haven't seen the negative implications, or could have foreseen the negative implications on Roe v. Wade. And so we've seen that overturning Roe v. Wade has kind of backfired on Republicans. We saw this in the 2022 midterms with the underwhelming red wave that was expected. We also saw in Kentucky a referendum that was denied, that would have amended, or that would have denied the constitutional protection, or sorry, the constitutional denying of abortion. So I think that women have been very vocal in the ballot box about their maybe upsetness over overturning Roe v. Wade. Right now, women support Harris by a 16-point margin for 57% to 41%, and men also strongly back Trump by 18 points with a 58% lead for Trump over 40%. Trump hasn't really had a great response in Harris's attack over abortion. Trump's stance on abortion has kind of been confusing and saying different things and not really being clear on whether he would support a national abortion ban. And ads from Harris's campaign has also tried to appeal to conservative women by saying that your vote may, you don't have to tell your husband how you're voting or how your family, tell your family how you're voting, your vote is secret. And I think that she's really trying to pull not only women, but specifically also these kind of conservative women that are a little hesitant about the reproductive rights if Trump was president.
Definitely, and I think there's been a lot of controversy over how women will vote in this election. I mean, we've seen in the news cycle politicians telling women that they should vote the same way as their husband, or even the childless cat lady comments from Vance earlier in the election process. I want to briefly end with talking about middle-class blue-collar voters, as they are another really important demographic in this election. Can you tell me a little bit how Trump and Harris have messaged towards them and how the economy has been a big factor and how that messaging is done?
Yeah, well, the economy is a huge issue. I would say abortion has been a really key tool for Democrats to frame the election. And I would say Republicans have really used the economy as a way to kind of show that Republican control would be great because they can fix, that Trump has argued that he will be able to fix the economy. As we know, COVID really did impact heavily the economy and inflation. And Americans, although inflation is down, Americans aren't really feeling it at home, as the economy is the biggest issue for voters. So since Harris took the stage at the DNC in August, she's kind of pitched, like I said, the idea of opportunity economy as a part of her platform, bringing together labor workers, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. So she's established some policy plans, like a $6,000 child tax credit, a $25,000 loan of home buyers, trying to, pitch some economic policies that Biden was not able to get done, or maybe Biden has not proposed yet. Whereas Trump, like I said, has framed a large part of his campaign as president on he will restoring the economy. Trump is taking advantage of the economic hardship. He has said that, Trump has had economic policies on paying, he's promised to pay off the national debt, reduce inflation, and also placing tariffs on many more U.S. imports. And I think that when talking about the middle class and like blue collar workers, it is something that in 2016 people blamed for why Clinton partially lost the election. In 2020, Biden made some, increases among that demographic, but it's still, I think, a really hard demographic that Democrats still have to focus on and try to vie for their votes. And so right now, right now, though, Harris apparently has a double-digit advantage on the economy, apparently, and the cost of living over Trump. So it is a little curious about that.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how Harris and Trump's messaging on the economy affect blue-collar voters and how blue-collar voters turn out this election cycle. But that'll be it for both of us right now. Make sure you come back in a few minutes for our next segment as we pull towards the end of our coverage for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to Hood College's coverage of the 2024 U.S. elections. I'm Alejandro Munoz.
And I'm William Lantry.
And we are going to take a look back at this electoral map, see where the shifts are happening. This happened as I looked down on my screen. It looks like the AP is calling North Carolina for Donald Trump with 89% in. It's 50.8 to Donald Trump and 48.1 to Kamala Harris. I know there was some speculation over whether the lieutenant governor's comments would have an impact, but it's looking like maybe not so much. Looking to Georgia with 90% in, they're at 51, and Kamala Harris is at 48.3. Pennsylvania 76% reporting with Donald Trump at 51.1% and Harris at 47.9. And then moving over, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. With Wisconsin, we have 65% coming in, and Donald Trump is ahead, 50.7 to 47.8 for Kamala Harris. But Michigan, we have 31%, Minnesota 14%. So some of these states are still up in the air, and some of these are looking like they're coming to the close. Any reactions?
You know, I'm hoping Walls' home state, does go blue. We're seeing it red. It's only we're not getting all the reporting, but there's still hope for this race. Kamala is still in it. If she does get Arizona or if she gets Nevada, getting Pennsylvania, it's going to be such an important state for her to get. If Pennsylvania is out, she might as well call it. But you know what? There is hope. We aren't even getting Nevada yet. California just started. Arizona, we can help and pray. We're only around like 2,000 votes away from Harris overtaking him. So there is still hope for Harris voters.
That's right.
Now we've given a lot of attention to our presidential candidates tonight. We've ignored the vice presidents a little bit. Now, what was your first introduction to Walls? What was the first thing you ever saw?
I remember going on to, I believe it was YouTube, and seeing that she had announced Waltz, and immediately going to look for what his policies were. And I saw he had a lot of progressive stuff. So it was looking with that pick like she was trying to maybe. In retrospect, it's easier to say this, but she was going for more of the moderate sort of policies, while she was bringing on a vice president who was coming to the more maybe youth-oriented progressive policies with the free healthcare, free lunches, free pre-K to high school education.
Yeah, that's great. And I spoke about this earlier. I didn't have the greatest introduction to Vance, but it was the only thing I really remembered from Vance was a few years ago. I think it was 2020. He made a big, now we can look back and say it was a political error. But he referred to Trump as America's Hitler. It was really something. He was one of the few Republicans who was actually, fighting against this movement. And now we see this change in him, where he's gone completely onto the other side. He's pushing the narrative even. He's writing the Project 2025 narrative. And so it's just this surprising shift. And most voters, this is his first time really being on a national stage. Same with Walls too. They are both needing to get used to it. We saw that in the debate.
Absolutely.
They were both, a little bit shaken up. It took some time for them to start rolling.
They're very cordial, though.
They were so cordial. What was up with that? They were so, you could really tell they were from the Midwest. They were just too nice to each other. They couldn't be mean.
Exactly.
No, but they have some, bad stuff in the press. Walls, this keeps coming up. Walls' biggest problem is that he keeps misspeaking. Remember when he had that mess up during the debate when he said,
I'm friends with school shooters.
Yes,
right.
It was
Absolutely.
It was a miss up.
Those gaps can really have an effect.
And him saying, he carried weapons of war. He just didn't do that,
Right.
and so he keeps misspeaking.
Right.
And so it's good. He is maybe it's good that that's the problem we need to worry about. Vance, it was this massive thing. He keeps just saying thing after thing after thing, like that childless cat lady thing was really bad.
Right.
We saw that a lot of people remember that from the endorsement Taylor Swift gave to Kamala Harris. And she wrote it as childless cat lady. And it was, what else? What did he say? He's just been pushing the narrative.
It's quite a contrast when you see Trump trying to go for more of a moderate angle, and then you have Vance kind of keeping up this maybe sort of extreme, but definitely leaning to the right.
Yeah. Interesting though, if we look even further back into these people's histories, they didn't clean up quite well enough. So Walz in 1995, it's crazy we need to think about that stuff from the 90s.
Right.
But in 1995, he had a drunk driving arrest.
Right.
And it was pretty bad. He was going 96 in a 55 with 0.028% over the state limits, which was pretty bad. And then that's bad enough. He served his fine. He then later, it came back when he ran for Senate. It came back in 2006, and I forget if it was his campaign manager, if it was him, they misspoke. And then it resulted in it being another thing for him they needed to deal with. And then again, in this election, it came back where another staff member misspoke and said he wasn't actually intoxicated. Then it resurfaced that of a court, what would you call it, document?
Yeah.
Tim Walz saying himself, I knew I was intoxicated, I apologize. And it just keeps coming back to him. But luckily, that's the only thing we need to really
Absolutely. These things can really have an effect on how people view these candidates.
Absolutely.
Now, we're going to go to a break, and we will be right back with the rest of our coverage.
Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm Casey Rowine.
And I'm Maggie Ralston.
And this is Self-Care with Blazers and Blazers. Maggie and I do not get along politically. She's wrong about literally everything. Just kidding.
But we are still friends, and yes, it is possible.
With the holidays coming up, following this super close election race, we'd like to give you some tips on how to maintain friendships and family relationships with those who you don't necessarily agree with.
Our relationships with those we see every day are incredibly important and can be strained without proper communication regarding politics. Here are 3 things to remember when talking politics with those in your life.
Number 1, assess the setting and relationship with the person you're talking to. Is this a safe place to talk politics? Am I comfortable talking politics with this specific person?
2, avoid the extremes. If you choose to converse with this person, don't get into the utopia or dystopia. In simple terms, the world is not going to end over whichever issue you are talking about with this person.
Lastly, know when to end the conversation or walk away. You are allowed to do this. Sometimes winning a political debate is not the goal here. If it feels wrong to talk politics at the Thanksgiving table, simply ask to end the conversation and continue on with another.
We really hope these tips come in handy for you.
You know, and we've heard a lot of results tonight. The race is getting closer and closer as we go, so I know this may have struck a nerve for some people out there. We just want to say we hope you're doing all right wherever you're watching from.
We're going to talk about some practices to reduce anxiety when hearing these results.
The first one is make sure you're breathing. An uneasy feeling in your stomach may indicate that you need some food, water, or fresh air.
Don't glue your eyes to the TV. We totally understand how difficult it is to hear election results. To reduce anxiety, please keep the TV on periodically. If you really can't resist the urge, try and shut it off or keep it on in the background. Cook dinner, do a chore, or play a game with the TV on in the background.
And don't lose sleep to watch the election results. Deviating from your regular sleep routine can actually spike your anxiety, and it's going to make the day after election worse. Make your bedtime a non-negotiable with yourself.
Take some deep breaths. We hope you're doing all right out there. And you can be friends with those you're not necessarily politically aligned with, okay? All right. Have a good night, guys.
everyone.
Thank you for tuning in.